All right, everyone. The other day, for like maybe 10 or 20 minutes, the Trump-Putin summit thing was actually top trending worldwide. Now nobody's talking about it because they're too busy talking about the Supreme Court because of multiple decisions in Anthony Kennedy, and they're too busy talking about election polling. It's an afterthought. This is why the Trump-Russia sort of bullshit, I declare it to be nonsense. Every single time, if it were really as substantial as the Democrats claimed, oh, literally our republic has been endangered by a foreign state that literally stole an election, don't you think it would be a non-stop issue instead of just sporadically cropping up whenever Manafort is mentioned? The only time you hear about it now is when Trump mentions Russia himself, like he's planning to have a summit with Putin. I'll explain some reasons why it's a good thing right now. And then basically when Mueller does an update, and it never involves Donald Trump. At this point, it doesn't even involve anyone in the Trump family. It's mostly Paul Manafort. Manafort and his associates look like they were running some massive criminal operation a decade ago. They got caught up in it somewhat wrongfully in a probe that originally had a totally different intent and purpose. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because I guarantee it's a massive criminal web. It involves the Podesta Group and Paul Manafort, heavy hitters within fundraising. Yeah, it must be major. It involves the Ukrainian government and some other groups too. It doesn't involve Donald Trump. No, Trump will escape unscathed, because he did nothing wrong, did nothing illegal. That's my honest view. But Trump is planning to meet with Putin, and I'll tell you one thing they really need to discuss in depth, and that's Korea. What people aren't considering is the possibility that this has to do with his maneuvering in the Korean Peninsula, and relatively less to do with anything in specifically U.S.-Russian relations, because Russia, while its economy is backsliding relative to a lot of the others in the world, it's still a major military player, if only because of its massive nuclear stockpile and the fact that it has a shit ton of tanks and artillery. Land capabilities are certainly quite advanced. Maybe more so than at sea, or at this point maybe in the air. Russia is a major military player, and it does share a border, most people don't realize this, with North Korea. Some people didn't ever notice that little sliver of land that Russia and North Korea are actually conjoined on, and of course the maritime border is substantial. Russia has a vested interest in being at the table and at least having part of the discussion over what happens in Korea. I can guarantee it, because what do you think Russia wants? A military standoff right next to itself that could go nuclear? No, of course not. Putin doesn't want that. Now, while Putin doesn't have any real control over North Korea, they will have a diplomatic seat at the table if North Korea opens up more. Russia's involved. They've got a land border. There's going to be trade. There's going to be travel. Well, naturally, the Russian government wants to make sure that it goes in a favorable direction and not just gets thrown to China and the United States and Korea itself, like a conjoined Korea. They also don't want a reunified Korea that's going to be antagonistic towards them. Look, there are already a bunch of Western-friendly countries in the region. You've got Taiwan, you've got Japan, increasingly I'd say Vietnam, certainly Malaysia. India's leading in that direction, and South Asia, along with some others. So Russia's got a vested interest in saying, well, I don't really want Korea reunifying, having maybe even nuclear capabilities, or at least a massive military, and then being, Russia-phobic or something. I don't think that he wants that. It would be a bad idea. Wouldn't you think that if you don't make sure that Putin gets at least a few breadcrumbs out of it in some semblance, that he will do everything within his power to try to block any improvement in negotiations with Korea? Of course he would, for diplomatic purposes. Russia doesn't want to have another country that's basically mainly antagonistic towards the United States suddenly become West-friendly and then sort of abandon any thought about Russia. No, he wants to make sure that he's got friendly relations too, so they need to talk about that. Plus, in the wake of this announcement, people are like, well, so Trump is a pawn. So basically, you think that it is a good idea for the President of the United States to ignore his duty to conduct normalized diplomacy with nations we are not at war at because you declare him to be a Putin pawn or something. That's a conspiracy theory. It's literally tinfoil hat bullshit. It sounds like the sort of stuff that you would get off of Sputnik, to tell the truth. It's really, really out there to suggest that that's what's happening. The concept that the Russian government, with the economic capabilities that it has, is capable of controlling the U.S. is totally nonsense. It can't even control its own sphere. It can barely maintain control over Iran at this point. The Iranians could go rogue any day, cause a regional war or something. No, Russia's not involved with our political system. I honestly believe that that's an excuse that was originally prefaced on the DNC having an internal meltdown over server security, so they decided to blame Russia and then never let anyone look at the server. I wonder why, rather than own up to the fact that they are totally fucking inept and don't know what they're doing, that the emails were real, and that people can focus on them at their leisure and realize how scummy the DNC really was being. That's what they were seeking to cover up. They realized it would be a major political scandal, lead to their loss in the election, which it did anyway. It was rather funny. But an even bigger loss, they probably would have been wiped out altogether in the House and Senate and in all state houses, and Clinton would have struggled to win California if people were focused on the content of the emails. So rather than, actually discuss them, they said, well, Russians hacked in. Yeah, the Russians are trying to steal the election, folks. They love Donald Trump because he doesn't want to start World War III. It doesn't make any sense. It literally makes no sense. The DNC's claims were never corroborated. No evidence was ever given for their claims. And yet the entire national ethos is, oh yeah, we just take it for granted that Russia stole the election or colluded with the Trump team or at least tried to influence things. I see no evidence of that. In almost 2 years of investigation, they have uncovered not one tangible shred of evidence that they can actually back up. They just said, well, we're kind of confident that it happened. Yeah, we think that it's likely. Yeah, okay, some Russian nationals bought a few Facebook ads. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that prefaced on that, the President of the United States should ignore one of his primary duties and just say fuck you to the entire Russian nation, so that we can't get anything accomplished in the world without constantly being obstructed. Now, we probably managed to rise above that. Again, Russia doesn't have nearly as much diplomatic power as the United States, but wouldn't it be easier to just say, hey, Putin, we're digging around in Korea, trying to prevent a war. Don't worry, we're not being antagonistic. Yeah, okay, we'll set you up with a meeting with Kim Jong-un too or something. Wouldn't that make more sense? There's an old saying in Vermont. It's marketed as a Vermont-centric saying, although I'm sure that it's elsewhere. You get more flies with a spoonful of sugar than a gallon of vinegar. There's also speak softly and carry a big stick. Well, we've got a big stick, and people always criticize Trump when he waves it around in a threatening manner. But then they also criticize him when he wants normalized diplomacy. It doesn't make sense. They're like, oh, well, Trump is more busy talking to dictators than he is to our friends. Yes, because he's trying to solve major world crises that involve heads of state that are hostile to the United States, like Kim Jong-un. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the North Koreans were not antagonistic towards our interests? That's what he's seeking to accomplish. Nobody worries about, hey, yeah, we need to go talk to the French because they might start bombing us or something. That doesn't happen. The French might go rogue, try to rebuild their empire and supplant the United States and invade. It'll be terrible. We need to send Trump over there right away. Now, if Trump goes to Western Europe, he's not accomplishing anything other than tippling back some champagne or eating truffles or something. That's what he does when he goes to Western Europe. And then he gets into a fight with Angela Merkel over a piece of candy or something, apparently. By the way, remember that time that W came up behind her and started squishing her shoulders? Yeah, what a wonderful statesman he was to the Democrats out there that have begun to lionize the Bush family because they said they didn't vote for Donald Trump. Oh, they're good again. They're good guys again after committing genocide and war crimes. Gitmo? What's Gitmo? Oh, the Patriot Act? Forget about that. It's been so long that we sort of forgot it existed. Yeah, the birth of the NSA surveillance apparatus with Project Echelon and some of these things that we called conspiracy theories 10 years ago. Yeah, they're actually real, but we don't care anymore. Yeah, the government should look through your library book records, make sure you're not building explosives or something. I mean, you've lost your mind if you think that it's a good idea not to have some semblance of diplomacy. Russia is antagonistic towards the United States. Obama himself declared them not to be an enemy as recently as 2012 when he was running against Romney. He looked, surprised that Romney said Russia was our main competitor in the world. He's like, oh, no, they're not a foe or a strategic enemy or anything. The Cold War's over, Mitt. Ha, ha, ha. Basically, you're outdated. But where'd that mentality go? I guess it went out the window and the DNC needed a convenient scapegoat. Blaming Russians is a lot easier than explaining to the American people that an internal progressive employee figured out that the DNC was fucking Bernie Sanders up the ass, so decided to leak things to WikiLeaks. It makes much more sense to say Russians hacked us, Russians run WikiLeaks, Russians run the Trump campaign, Russians everywhere, Red's under the bed. Makes a lot more sense because when you make that big lie, more people will believe it. That's about all. Peace out.